Well, hello, and welcome yet again to another lecture that we will have for this class. We're moving right along, and by now you've gotten the opportunity to turn in your first assignment, and we've had a couple of the forums, and we'll continue to have those, both the forums as well as the assignments. So make sure that you guys are engaging and staying on top of it. Stay on top of your reading, because once you get behind on that, then it's really easy to fall behind in this class. And so, like we said, it's boom, 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 boom. It'll be over before you know it. So endure till the end. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump on in for today. And if you have questions and that kind of thing, I'll try to get back to you guys as quickly as possible, through email and those kinds of things. So to begin, I'll start with a couple of quotes. One from Notorious B.I.G. Back in the days, our parents used to take care of us. Look at them now. They even effing scared of us, calling the city for help because they can't maintain. Dang, shit done changed, right? And he didn't quite use that language. He used some other language. I'm not going to use it right now. And then here's another one. Cash rules everything around me. Cream get the money. Dollar dollar bill, y'all. Right, Method Man from the Wu-Tang Clan. Name of the song is Cream. The first song is Things Done Change, just Done Change, right? By Biggie off of his first major album release. And I believe that may have even been the very first single off of there. And so these two will hopefully help to frame our conversation for today, in terms of this lecture that we're getting ready to give. So far we've gotten the opportunity to talk about the formation of hip hop. And there could be so much more that could be said, but there's not enough time in this course by any means to discuss all those things that would be relevant. And by all means, and I'll pull this book out just in case you haven't seen it. And I know I've mentioned it before, and we've had some readings from here. But if you get a chance, if you really want to, hip hop, the history, right? It's the history of the hip hop generation. Jeff Chang, Can't Stop, Won't Stop. Excellent piece. That's what we read about. DJ Kool Herc, also the Necropolis piece. We read out of there. Excellent read. Um, and so by all means, check that piece out. Will really give you some in-depth information on those things if you're interested in that. Um, as we should now begin to have a feel, and I know that some of you, I'm getting a chance to talk with some of you. Yeah, you're still filling it out. And that's okay that you're still filling it out. And we're going to continue to fill it out together. Make sure you listen to the music, that kind of thing. We get a feel for this culture that started out as disparate and different, what it's all about. And now we can kind of turn our thoughts to some of the issues that are deemed as problematic, that are part of the hip hop narrative. Okay, before we get there, um, let's briefly talk about hip hop moving from being a boutique cultural form that to one that is ready for mass consumption. And Jeff Chang does a good job of telling that story as well. So hip hop, right? It starts out as something that is easily communicable and allowed for the creation of music on the ground, right? This is something that's happening. I mean, as you said before, this is happening in a 7 mile strip of land. This is not huge, right? And then from there it kind of spreads. But even in it spreading, I mean, it's really only happening in New York and taking place in New York, right? and then it begins to spread. The sound and the dances and the this and the that begins to spread across the country, but it's really is happening in New York. And as somebody who was living in New York in the 1980s. I mean, it was a great place to be. Good person to talk to here on campus is Miss White. She was, in New York even before then, right? And being able to talk about, what it was like as this culture, as this sound, as this way of dress, this way of being begins to gain social footholding, if you will. And I want to talk about just not just in terms of that, but also in terms of the music and the sound. Um, and as we were saying, right, the creation allowed for the creation of music on the ground. I mean, when hip hop begins, I mean, this is what it is. One could make the argument, and perhaps at some point I'll sit down and I'll think through it, and I'll just throw this out here as a nugget that hip hop really is the most American form of music that there is, right? I mean, this thing starts from the sounds of different records being spun and being placed together, right? So that people can dance. So it's very basic, and then people grabbing the mic and being able to rap over the music. So it's on the ground. It's grassroots, if you will. Um, and so when you think about that, right, it wasn't considered hokey or uncool to make a rap in and for a local setting, right? Because that's what it all was to begin with, right? Now we've gotten to a point, right, where people begin rapping in our context, and I was like, I don't know if that's cool or not. That's not really what it is, but it's not. It didn't happen in the same way that it had progressed to where it is now, right? It had not become so complicated that both in terms of rhyming schemes or instrumentation in terms of the music, right? That ordinary people could not use this powerful art in particular for messages and for having fun, right? I mean, this is what so as it's coming out and it's taking off, right? People are like, oh, I can use this. We can rap over a beat, right? We can make this happen. You have live instrumentation. Oh, I can do this over a piano. I can do this over another. I have instrumental of another record. I can do this over an instrumental. I can put some words together, and just very basic da 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 da. And even as you go back and you listen to some of those old songs that I have you listening to, right? You listen to the message. You listen to super rapping. I mean, it's just da 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 da. Oh, da da. Right? It's not as complex, right? Even as by the time you get to some of this stuff in the '90s and beyond, and the way in which these guys are putting these words together, even the creation of polyrhythms through what they are doing with their mouths, by the way in which they're saying their words, we're not even there yet. Okay, it's not even that complex. And so just to kind of give you an example of what this was and how this energy was there, I was thinking about it. I said, "Wow!" I remember being, a child, maybe about 6 years old, and learning this, having learned, being told I'm going to learn this rap song. I'm really enjoying myself. It was written by my aunt, right? Who, at this point in life, my aunt is 65 plus years old, something like that. This is not my great aunt. This is my aunt. And so the title of the song is "I Like Myself," and she wrote it. She was a school teacher. She wrote it for her kids at the school, and so I was talking about it with her last week, and she was telling me how even now, the kids, they were kids then. They were probably about my age. Um, some a little bit older. Now they see her, and her name is Oda Jimmy. So they come on, Mrs. Oda Jimmy, and they still remember the words to these songs. So it's a powerful piece of art. So I'm gonna perform the song for you guys, and just as an example of how simple this is, but effective. and the way in which, when we talk about hip hop, we talk about rap, how we're able to use this at this point in time of history. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're all right. You're all right with me. 2, 3, 4. And now you gotta sing it. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're all right. You're all right with me. 2, 3, 4. Hello, everybody in America. Here is a rap for you. I like myself, and I want you to know that you're all right too. Caring for others because we're brothers. We all have problems and joys. Here's a reminder to be kinder to all the girls and boys. Rich man, poor man, beggar man, teacher, doctor, lawyer, astronaut, preacher, woman, man, boy, girl. We gotta get along in this great big world. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're okay too. I like myself, and you're all right. You're all right with me. 2, 3, 4. Okay, I gotta clap it up for myself. But really, okay. So that's the song, right? Very simple, okay. But as I said, right now, maybe for those who are familiar with as rap becomes commercialized, as we get into in the 80s, but really past the 80s, and certainly the late 80s, getting into the 90s and the 2000s and beyond, now we're like, that would not fly. But for 1988, when this song, right, she writes the song and it comes out, right, okay, so I would have been like 5, something like that. This is on target, right? This is what the kids are doing. This is what they're loving, right? And so it's not hokey. It's not whatever. And no, it doesn't have commercial success. It wasn't designed to have commercial success. It was designed to have local success, and that's what it had. Okay, okay. So beginning in the 1980s. So you have this is, it's still happening at the local levels, right? But beginning in the 1980s, hip hop begins to be recognized as a viable, expressive cultural form economically and otherwise, right? In other words, it's able to be exploited economically. The message, right? We've listened to the message, is widely accepted as the genesis of hip hop for mass consumption. And I had you guys read that, and I think that story is really interesting about how hip hop. And I told you guys before about the Get Down. If you get a chance to check it out on Netflix, because right, they're showing, right, even in the Get Down, how this thing becomes commercialized. From something you can't use other people's music, but when hip hop figures out how to use other people's music and still make money, right? And that's the part that's crazy. It doesn't start out that way with the message, right? In this song that gets thrown out there, the message as well as that the message is one song, but then you got hip hop rappers delight hip hop dap dap, and you don't stop the bang bang boogie, right? So the story of rappers delight, excuse me, is what Jeff Chang talks about. He also talks about the message in that book as well. Um, but I had you guys to read about Rappers Delight, and then the creation of this. And the Get Down talks about this, how there's a move away from the records and the DJ, and now you've got the band and bringing this in, and there's this feeling, right? But you're eliminating the DJ, and this all surrounds the DJ, right? But then you have groups like Run DMC who are able to figure out how to incorporate the DJ in there to some degree, but still not. The DJ never quite has the same. Um, Center place, if you will, at the crux, at the center of hip hop, that it did when it was this. underground, localized affair. Okay, so it becomes this, and it's not really. We talk about Run DMC. It's not until Run DMC is the first really major rap group that has, commercial success across the board. Okay, hip hop takes off. Run DMC's claim to fame was combining their lyrics over hard guitar sounds, and one song in particular, "Walk This Way," in which they team up with pop culture icons Aerosmith. And this song and teaming up with Aerosmith helped to boost their status to legendary. This song in particular was a breakthrough not just because of the combination of sounds, but it was seen as the blending of youth cultures, both black and white. This was the beginning of hip hop being the definitive youth culture, not just for blacks, but at least the exposure thereof for all American youth. Run DMC were the first um, commercial success, being the first rap group to boast of gold and eventually double gold, or what we now think of as platinum record sales. Essentially, they were the ones who proved that this noise could make money. They were able to leverage their cultural status and command a lucrative advertising deal from Adidas, and were the first rap group to be nominated for a Grammy. It was through them, LL Cool J, NWA, and others that rap music became a huge commercial success, right? So when you talk about commercialized rap, you cannot talk about this story without talking about Run DMC and what they were able to do. And even the way in which, right, we talk about the ubiquity of hip hop, the ubiquity of rap. And I mentioned this before. The NBA Finals just finished up last night. But Kendrick Lamar all over that piece, all over that thing, and even had a scene as I was looking at it last night, had a version, right, of his song DNA that he wrote specifically just for the NBA. And so this commercialized success begins with the guy that has the or doesn't, I guess now anymore, um, had the TV show Reverend Run, right, and we learn about his kids Diggy and the girls Vanessa and such and so forth. Okay, so it's there. As rap became larger, however, it began to display what we are calling moral and ethical dilemmas. Okay, moral and ethical dilemmas. To be clear, I want us to be clear that we're talking about commercial rap as opposed to what some may call underground or grassroots rap, right? Which is what we were doing before with the song that I was performing for you all. Although at this moment, underground or um, grassroots rap is hardly at times different from commercial rap in terms of subject matter. At this point, we're talking about right now, at this point in history, it is difficult to differentiate between the two given technological advances, right? So you have persons like, I mean, is Chance the Rapper considered commercial rap or underground rap? He's not signed, or Soldier Boy, who becomes famous off of YouTube. It becomes huge without the backing of any kind of distribution deal. But and we may consider, because of subject matter, because of how and the way in which they have gotten to where they are, we may consider the apparatuses of change because of the technology, right? And so as technology continues to shift, right, the definitions also have to move. All right, so um, this conversation is really about rap that is created with mass consumption in mind as opposed to particular localities, right? So when we're saying commercialized rap, we're talking about that rap that is created for mass consumption. And so based upon that definition, then yes, Chance the Rapper, yes, Soldier Boy, yes, any of the other internet sensations that may be out there, yes, by all means, these are persons that we would consider to fall under this particular umbrella. Okay, and so we talked about um, Run DMC, but let's talk about NWA. Right, NWA. With NWA came the first influx of what could be called gangster rap. Many of you have seen Straight Outta Compton, and the infiltration, right, along with this infiltration of gang, drug, and rape culture. And I want to draw a line between these cultures, right? Gang, drug, and rape culture. I want to draw a line between these and street culture because we mentioned before KRS-One's definition of hip hop, and it was inclusive of so many street elements that did not necessarily have anything whatsoever to do with, and he doesn't mention it, right? With drugs, gang, or rape. And when I say rape culture, in particular, I'm talking about the misogyny, the hatred of women inherent within the music and culture that produce the necessary environment for rape to be pervasive and acceptable, right? And within rape culture is a certain understanding of the certain objectification of women's bodies, and even in terms of the language in which that is used, the sexualization of women, in particular black women, and what happens and what is done with their bodies, um, in a way in which that it becomes normalized, right? And so because of that, then rape is perhaps, and it becomes an extreme, but yes, rape then becomes a viable means of male expression of maleness, right, or of dominance, at times. And this is what we mean by, right, this is what we mean by rape culture. Okay, today, I don't want to delve into all the intricacies, but let's concentrate on the violence that it has been said that hip hop causes or at least advocates for. This is a long saga of hip hop being read as an American cultural pariah that is seen as a parasite that causes disease and urban malady. With the advent of NWA, Eazy-E, Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, gangster rap was born, at least in its commercialized rendering. It was a commercial success for several reasons. For those whose daily existence was in the inner city, these hardcore rappers and lyrics depicted much of the rage that persons felt in overly surveyed, economically abandoned wastelands called ghettos. Songs like F the Police, Express Yourself, and others were relatable. For others, white youths in particular, who were the major consumers of this music, this kind of music took them on a kind of quote unquote ghetto tour in which they could imagine themselves gangsters, pimps, and drug dealers without ever having to live the harsh realities of this kind of existence, never having to encounter these persons, right? Never having to walk down the street in fear of what was going to happen, but they could experience it from the safety of their homes, right? In this way, commercialized rap, right, became a voyeuristic pleasure for those who would not normally dare to enter the confines of Compton, Bedford Stuy, Long Beach, and other hoods, right? A voyeur, right? A voyeur is one who views something else, gaining pleasure by what someone else is experiencing, right? This is what we do, right? This is what happens when people, when we view pornography, right? When you are a voyeur, when you are watching, you imagine yourself as being this person. And this is the same thing, right? As people listen to this music, right? And they imagine themselves, yeah, I'm, so and so, and they're going along and they're rapping the lyrics and they're taking on the personas of the person who's rapping this music. Okay, they're taking on this persona, which is at least in part then how this argument begins to get built, because people do take on the personas of the music that they listen to sometimes, and whether or not it actually causes violence. Okay, listening into these spaces on records did not have to give an account for why these characters, traits, and circumstances existed in the first place. Trisha Rose writes, In fact, many conservatives of hip hop refuse to acknowledge that the ghetto is a systematic matrix of racial, spatial, and class discrimination that has defined black city life since the first half of the 20th century, when the Great Black Migration dramatically reshaped America's cities. It is these circumstances, with the addition of deregulation, deindustrialization, the expansion of illicit street economies, i.e., the explosion of the drug trade, crack. In particular, crack was crazy in the 1980s. If you don't remember it, if you weren't around, crack was absolutely nuts. The proliferation of automatic weapons, and some, right, who would argue the erosion of larger American values and the decentralization of religious authorities and spiritual institutions, i.e., the shrinking of the church and other institutionalized religions, that not only allowed gangster rap to be born, but condoned some of the ways of living that it espoused, right? And so right now, what I'm thinking is, right, I'm thinking of a line of New Jack City in which Nino Brown says this. Nino Brown, y'all remember Nino Brown, right? He says, you gotta rob to get rich in the Reagan era. In another spots, he says, in times like these, people want to get real high, real fast, right? And so the explosion, right, of crack, right, the explosion of crack is at least related to, right, these things that we've already talked about it some, right, in terms of talking about deindustrialization, but also deregulation, right? When we talk about deregulation, and Rose talks about it some. So make sure that you're reading, because some of these terms and some of these things that I'm mentioning, I'm pulling out, right, of the things that you guys are supposed to read, and it ought to allow you to go back and to reference that. But deregulation is really talking about the ways, early in the 20th century, there was legislation that was put in place that kept companies from becoming monopolies, right? You know, I remember the game Monopoly, right? And this was in due part to what took place in the 19th century with persons like Carnegie Steel, U.S. Steel, uh, 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 Rockefeller, and talking about the railroads, and what he does with, obviously does with oil, and others that are able to form these huge conglomerates that are able to control not just American economies, right? The American economy as a whole. They can hold up these few persons, right? Have all this power, but also American politics, and so they're able to say, okay, well, we have to regulate in order to make this happen, right? So that you do not create an oligarchy, but rather this actually is functions as a democracy, is what legislatures, as well as President Franklin Roosevelt, I believe it was, who put those in place, right? So regulation, right? And regulation, it was deregulation and pure capitalism that helped to form what became the Great Depression, right? And so these regulatory um, issues were put in place in order to bring us out of the depression. And every time they deregulate, we go into a recession. And that's what happens in the 1980s. So deregulation takes place under Ronald Reagan, this notion of trickle down economics, nothing ever trickles down. And folk, the poor get poor, right? The rich get richer, the poor get poor, right? So Nino Brown, right, saying this, and even though this is a book from the 19 from the this is a movie, excuse me, from the 1990s. It's supposed to be depicting the 1980s and the explosion of crack on the scene in the city of New York, fictitiously, but also in some ways very realistically. And he says, in times like these, people want to get real high, real fast, right? People want to get real high, real fast, right? As they are attempting to escape, right? They are attempting to escape the problems that are out here. And you take crack, people getting high, and people attempting to carve out, right, space on the street in order to sell this drug, along with the expansion, right, of weaponry and the ability of people on the street to get their hands on semi-automatic and automatic weapons. You put these two the same place, it creates a, uh, um, a powder keg, right, ready for violence, right, explosion, boom, poverty, the inability to obtain employment, right, completely problematic, right? Um, and so there's a certain sense, right, out of this, there's a certain sense of hopelessness and fatalism present within Nino Brown's social commentary. Trisha Rose backs up Nino Brown's sense of economic disparity. During Ronald Reagan's second term, for example, more than one-third of black families earned incomes below the poverty line. By contrast, poverty rates hovered between 8 and 9% among white families. During the same period, black teenagers' already high levels of unemployment increased from 38.9% to 43.6% nationally. In some Midwestern cities in the Great Lakes region, the figures were as high as 50 to 70%. By contrast, white teenage unemployment was around 13%. Okay. So Jay-Z, then this is his response on one of his songs. He raps, cherry M3s with the top back, red and green G's all on my hat, North Beach leathers, matching Gucci sweater, Gucci sneaks on to keep my outfit together. Whatever 100 for the diamond chain, can't you tell that I came from the dope game? Blame Reagan for making me into a monster. Blame Oliver North, I ran Contra, I ran contraband, that they sponsored before this rhyming stuff. We was in concert, right? Jay is saying, hold up, right? This whole notion, right? And so he's going back and talking about Freeway Ricky Ross and the flooding, right, of American inner cities, pumping them with the guns, with drugs, right, funding the CIA, and the way in which, right, all right, Ronald Reagan is sitting at the top of this thing as the president. He knows what's going on. Oliver North, right, and this notion that the way all this kind of came together was conspiracy. Okay, it was conspiracy, and it creates this perfect place, right, for violence. From my viewpoint, it is these circumstances that produce the violence that is present within hip hop music. Make sure that you read. We've mentioned that Rose's chapter entitled "Hip Hop Causes Violence." She does an excellent job in analyzing the issues beyond playing the blame game. So tired of that. Certainly, for those who speak of violence and at times participate in the violence that they speak of, we must hold them accountable. We must hold these guys, folks, rapping about this stuff, glorifying it. We have to hold them accountable. There have been a long list of rap stars who have been charged or incarcerated for violence, weapons, drugs. Jay-Z, right, stabbing somebody. T.I. carrying guns. Gucci, he shot somebody. Tupac, right. Pimp C, Shine, stabbed somebody. C Murders, killed somebody. Young Turk, Snoop Dogg, right. Murder is the case that they gave me. He made a song about it, right. My goodness, and I'm sure that I have not even touched the surface. However, it is fair to state that hip hop causes. However, is it fair to state that hip hop causes violence, or that it is responsible for the sociopathic behavior of those who listen to its lyrics? I'm not so sure about that. In fact, I don't think so. It seems more likely that more often than not, it is poverty and poor socialization that causes violence, both in practice and in lyric. Further, the violence that is portrayed in hip hop music is symptomatic of a violent American society. Violence begets violence. Even when we are referencing violence of the spirit, author Bell Hooks writes, the sexist, misogynistic, patriarchal ways of thinking and behaving that are glorified in gangster rap are a reflection of the prevailing values in our society. Values created and sustained by white supremacist capitalistic patriarchy. Right? Let me say that. I really love this quote. I'm going to say it one more time. Right? For those of us who want to blame the world's problems on gangster rap and black youth culture. And even the ways in which we can take and we can extend this conversation in terms of black youth engagement and interaction with the police. But author Bell Hooks writes, the sexist, misogynistic, patriarchal ways of thinking and behaving that are glorified in gangster rap are a reflection of the prevailing values in our society, values created and sustained by white, supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. Gangster rap is certainly problematic. However, it is not alone in its complicity with values that help to produce terrible outcomes for poor inner city persons. With that being said, does this music have a negative effect? At times, absolutely yes, particularly on young minds. But can we say that it causes violence? I don't think so. You may disagree, but I don't think so. Could it help someone who is already having thoughts? Um, could it help someone along and getting them to that point? Yeah, it very well may, right? It very well may, right? If you're already there, you listen to it. It confirms what you're already thinking. Just to kind of go along with that thought, as we close out, it gives you some lyrics. We opened up with some lyrics by Biggie. We'll close down with some lyrics by Biggie. Um, and he says, F that, I want to tote guns and shoot dice. All my life I've been considered as the worst, lying to my mother, even stealing out a purse. Crime after crime, from drugs to extortion. I know my mother wished she got a effing abortion. This might be inflammatory, right? This might be inflammatory to a depressed teenager in need of a hotline and some help. But the picture is more complex than it is simple. It's not as simple as just blaming what we hear on a song on someone else. So, um, weigh in the conversation, okay? As get a chance to read and analyze, what's really going on here. Is the music to blame? The violence and even is it glorifying? Well, it's not to blame, but it's glorifying. Is it even glorifying? Or is it doing as, Chuck D said, acting as the CNN uh, of the ghetto, so to speak. But that's it for today. I know it's been a while, 30 some odd minutes here. So make sure, like I said, make sure you're staying on top of what you need to stay on top of. And I will see you guys on the next time. All right, peace.